known as BSI. We are a team of readers and debaters. This is not a one-person operation, so great thanks to Izzy Kuhn, Shirley Jacobson, Jackie Liebman, Jackie Lifshitz, Linda Miller, Diane Rush, Cindy Stewart, Ann Vodachuk, and then there's me. Okay. Vietnam was a very traumatic period in American history. It was a period of protest, agonizing, splitting families, friends. It was very difficult, and it seems we're living in difficult times now. It's kind of like flashbacks. And this summer, my friend Dorothy, my travel sidekick and companion and friend and quasi-sister, went to Colorado. While in Colorado, after touring it, we went to Aspen to see my daughter. We went out to dinner with her significant other, and his parents. And during the conversation, after everybody talked, Bill Sr. looked at me and said, "So Linda, what's on your mind?" And the first thing that popped out was, "I have to have a speaker for this book." He said, well, he lives in Newcastle, Colorado, about 40 minutes from Aspen, and he wasn't volunteering to come in. However, you never know who you're talking to. It turns out that he's a Vietnam veteran, and when I got home, he sent me these fabulous pictures, which are all captioned. I knew you couldn't read my writing, nobody can, so I put it on the computer. And these pictures were given to Bill in 1966, the black and whites. Come up and look at them later, or we'll move them there. And they were taken by a South Vietnamese photographer. Also in the package he sent me was something, I think you call it a thumb drive. I could make peace quicker between Russia and the Ukraine than I can understand anything about technology. So I brought this little thingamajig to the library where wonderful, fabulous Dina Viviani did what needed to be done to get the slides here. Bill Sr. took these while he was in Vietnam. So I'm doing the prologue. Larry, I'll tell you how I met Larry and his wonderful wife Julie, who's probably still figuring out who is this crazy lady that kept calling them on their vacation and how did she find them anyway. And he will present this program after I do this part that Bill sent me, and then I will wrap it up by telling you about my experiences in Vietnam and Cambodia. I've been a very lucky person to go to a lot of interesting places. So here's Bill Sr.'s letter that came with all this. Hi Linda, I'll start by giving you a little background about my Vietnam tour. I was in country from February 1966 until February 1967. My unit actually went over by water on the USS Nelson M. Walker. We were on the water for over 20 days. While en route, our orders were changed from a field hospital to taking over a Navy hospital in Saigon on April 1st, 1966. You may notice Navy markings on some of the vehicles they left for us, which would be in some of these pictures in some of the slides. The picture of the physician in the OR, which was labeled, is of an ophthalmologist. She went to school in the States, and the Vietnamese government would not license her to practice in her own country. The U.S. Army hired her, and at the time, she was the only ophthalmologist in the entire country. Eye cases from all over the country were flown in for treatment in our facility. The street scenes show you how undeveloped the biggest city was, let alone the outlying areas. The children liked to pose for the camera. Most of them did it willingly, but some wanted money. The packet of pictures were given to me by a local photographer. The Catholics and the Buddhists apparently didn't get along with each other. Some things don't change. I sent him the book after I got all this information. Thank you. And this is his reply after reading the book. Just wanted to touch base to make sure you received the package with pictures. Finished reading The Greatest Beer Run Ever last week. There were some references in the book to the 17th Field Hospital, which was my unit. Spooky, very spooky. The writer was there during the Tet Offensive in January 1968. I left in February of '67, but I know for sure some of the people I served with were still there. By the way, there is a movie with the same title starring Zac Efron. I don't know what channels it's on. What was spooky about that movie is it showed what Chick looked like when he was 26 when he was there, and Zac Efron, they looked like brothers. That was really kind of startling for casting of people. And now, how did I get my speaker? I thought and figured there had to be a veterans group, and I looked it up and I saw Larry's name. He's probably wondering why I ever put his name there for public view. And I proceeded to call him. He was on vacation with his lovely wife Julie in Williamsburg, and I went into my shtick because I really wanted to be a Vietnam vet for a speaker. I called Larry 3 times, he succumbed. And he volunteered, and I am totally delighted that he did. It takes a lot of courage to get up and speak to a group, and if you're a veteran, it takes more courage than ever. So let me get into Larry's part of the program. The Vietnam Veterans of America group is a national non-profit corporation founded in 1978. It is funded with no contributions from any branch of the United States government. It was chartered by the United States Congress and dedicated to Vietnam vets and their families. The group holds a congressional charter under Title 36 of the United States Code. It was founded on the following principle: never again will one generation leave veterans behind from the next generation. Stop and think where our country is since Vietnam, and where our men in uniform and women in uniform have trod on foreign soil, including today. So, it is with great pleasure and privilege that I introduce our guest speaker, Larry Gunny Strassner. So I'm going to read what he wrote to me. If we stick to my Military Veteran Association, then I would have to give options. I said, what do I call you? And his name is Larry Gunny Strassner. Gunny is slang for Gunnery Sergeant E7 in the Marine Corps. I served in the Marine Corps from 1966 to 1972 and served in Vietnam from the end of 1967 to the beginning of 1969. I was awarded a Purple Heart for injuries in combat and the Navy Achievement Medal with Combat B, along with various other medals and awards. It was a privilege and honor to serve. When released from active duty, I was the rank of Sergeant E5. After a couple more years in active service duty, I managed to achieve the rank of Gunnery E7, hence the moniker Gunny. I am a retired manufacturing engineering supervisor from GM Delphi after 40 years, where I actually managed an operation in Juarez, Mexico for 5 of those years. I am married, lovely Julie, and have 3 daughters. And I lost my place. 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren, okay. I am still a very active person and currently hold the offices of Adjutant for our American Legion Post 468, the Quartermaster of our VFW Post 4658, Secretary for our Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 20, that's how I found them, and a 13-year volunteer for Honor Flight Rochester, where I held a leadership position for years and just had the honor to lead our 71st mission on May 21st to 22nd to Washington, D.C., with 56 veterans, 56 guardians, and approximately 20 staff members so they could visit the memorials built and dedicated in their honor. So with great pride, I turn it over to Larry.
Can everybody hear me? Wow. I'm going to take this home. Is that okay, hon?
Yep, that's good.
I tend to ramble, as my wife always tells me, and I talk too much, but this is a great honor. It's a privilege. Thank you very, very much, Linda, Nina, and Brighton Library here for inviting me out. I guess I'm going to try to follow what I wrote down so I don't ramble on, okay? What Linda asked me to do is share my reflections and basically a review of the book, okay? This greatest beer run ever, all right? It's an interesting and very entertaining story of a trip that not too many people have taken or ever would want to take, if you think about it. I did mention to Linda right from the get-go, I said I'm not a very good reader of books, okay? I don't read a lot of books, okay? Some magazines, of course, but not too many books. I'm probably a worse reviewer of books. I really don't know how to review a book, okay? Oh yeah, I've got plenty of, opinions. But as far as an official review goes, I'm not very good at that. My wife, St. Julianne over here, actually read the majority of the book to me while we were on a long drive, all right, when we were going out down to the Smoky Mountains, okay? She actually read a very large portion, okay, of the book to me. So for me, it was great because I could listen to it, almost like going to the movies or listen to it on the radio, so it was great. I did read a whole bunch of the book myself personally, honest, I really did, okay, when I started out. And as I started reading, I realized, this guy Chicky, okay, John is quite a character. And he and I had quite a few things in common as I read, and what I read brought back a whole bunch of memories. And sorry. I said I wasn't going to let that happen.
Show us you're human, that's okay.
Anyway, some of the memories, as you can tell, weren't really that great. It's definite to me that Chicky, he drew the short straw when he volunteered for an adventure that was reportedly reinforced by the protests that were going on incessantly in the news reports and all around New York and other cities in America. It was also probably proportional to the number of courage-creating beers being consumed while they were in the bar. Linda was kind enough to send me a snippet, okay, a YouTube snippet of the movie that's coming up, and I can just picture myself sitting there with a whole bunch of guys at the bar. Hey, I'll do it. Not really knowing what he was getting himself into. Brought back a bunch of memories for me and many of us 19-year-old invincible, of course, Marines. And John was a Marine, okay, or active Marine. As I mentioned to Linda, there's no such thing as an ex-Marine. Once a Marine, you're always a Marine. I was impressed with the research that John Donahue Chicky did and not just the Vietnam War, but he associated comparisons to other wars and even some political and environmental atmospheres in different times in history. And he related that and intertwined that throughout the book. Yes, Chicky's explanation of his travels during his 1968 adventure really brought back many reflections and memories of a time that I've tried to forget, and most of us have, as can be attested to. You see, I was there in many of the same places at different but very close to the same times. He mentions the 1968 Tet offensives, okay? I was there for 2 of them, and I like to tell people, I actually got to see Bob Hope Show twice. 2 Christmases. I went to Vietnam in December of 1967. My send-off was abrupt. We went to staging in California. I just so happened to get married a few days before I went to staging to go to Vietnam. Looking back on it, it was probably one of the wrong decisions that I made in my life. My subsequent quick trip involved going from California to Guam, and first time I ever saw B-52 bombers. From there we went to Okinawa, and in Okinawa we staged there on call until we were ready to ship out and actually head into Vietnam, and we landed in Da Nang. When we landed in Da Nang, I remember pitch black, getting off a civilian airline and listening to some guy on a megaphone saying, "Follow me." Well, you couldn't see a thing except for some explosions that were going on, because in fact they were hitting the runway excuse me, with rockets and mortars when we landed. There was a terrible odor when we landed. It just smelled like human defecation all over the place, burning. And I wondered then, what the hell did I get myself into? Gotta get out of here. In any case, we managed to get through the night, sleeping an hour, getting up, moving the hooch that we were sleeping in a couple miles down the road, lifting it off of the trailer, sleeping for another hour, and then putting it back on the trailer and moving it, then getting back on all night long. Well, we were pretty tired in the morning when we wanted to get the hell out of there, okay, and find our duty station, because there were 165 of us and we all did not go to the same place. I was heading for Chu Lai. Chu Lai was approximately 40 miles south of Da Nang. I figured, well, that isn't so far. So I decided, as Chicky did, to go ahead and stick my thumb out on Highway 1. And I get it right. There's a album running around there, you'll be able to see the convoy. There was a convoy heading down Chu Lai, and I happened to hop on. So I hitchhiked to my duty station in Chu Lai. At that time, I was a Marine Lance Corporal, that's an E3. And as I mentioned, stationed at Chu Lai. And I mentioned where it was. I was in the 1st Marine Air Wing, Marine Aircraft Group 13, in Marine Air Squadron VMFA 323. We had tailhooks. Tailhooks are aircraft that are equipped to take off and land on aircraft carriers. Compliments of the Navy. The Navy, as I call it, is the Marine Corps Uber. We usually just call them up and say, "Hey, take me here." And that's what they did. These are F-4B Phantoms that I was working on. I was qualified going to all the different schools to work on several of these quote-unquote tailhooks. Aircraft, A6s, A4s, F4s, F8s, all these different types of aircraft. And I loved it. It was a tremendous job, okay, being able to work on those aircraft. My military occupational specialty, the MOS that they call it, was 6243, the avionics, okay. My main job was to work on these tailhooks. And when I got to Vietnam, I was just in time for the 1967-68 Tet holiday. Well, yeah, that's what it is. Tet was a holiday for all the Vietnamese. Toward the end of January, all hell broke loose and we were hit pretty hard with 122mm rockets and mortars all over the place. The hooch area, the hangar area, flight line as well. Mag 12, our sister group, was about a mile down the road from us. They had their ammo dump hit, and I thought it was the end of the world. Since there was a mushroom cloud like the atomic bomb pictures that I'd seen. The rushing concussion cloud from the explosion traveled towards us, hit me and knocked me flat on the ground while I was on my way to the bunker. And it was just yards away from the hooch that I was sleeping in. After that night and cleanup around the area, we had a brief respite for a couple of days since we, our aircraft, were seeking out the locations of the VC and the NVA. Anybody here not know what that is? VC, Viet Cong, and NVA, North Vietnamese Army? Okay, those were supposedly at that time the bad guys. And they were destroying our aircraft that we were responsible for, anything that they could find. All right, that helped us out for a while. However, it was just a few days later that we were under fire from rockets, 122mm and 140mm rockets, pretty large. They could send those things 7 miles. So by the time that they set them off and they hit us, they were gone. When the rocket exploded, I take that back. This time, my hooch, where I was sleeping, took a direct hit from a 122mm rocket. Okay, hit dead center. Went through the roof, through the floor, hit the sand, and blew up. When the rocket exploded, I and one other sleeping in my hooch were blown through the back wall of the hooch and landed in the sand, and I landed in the sand behind the hooch with my kneecaps shattered. We had been sleeping, so we were in a kind of fetal position, just sleeping there, and had no knowledge of anything that was going to happen other than the sirens were going when I woke up. Unfortunately, we lost 2 of our brothers in the hooch. I spent about 45 days in the Army American Hospital and then back on duty again, because that's what we do. Since I wasn't having to run around in the bush, I guess I was just blessed. Several of us crazy 20-year-olds decided that we needed to see what was going on in the rest of the country. This is kind of why, and I'm hoping that I'm explaining it, what this book did for me and to me. I can relate personally to what John Chicky actually did while he went on this beer run. We needed to see what was going on in the rest of the country because we were stuck in July. We went over to the Black Cats, which was an outfit in the Army. It was a Huey squadron, UH-1E helicopter squadron. We volunteered to fly in place of any of the gunners, door gunners they called them, who had already accumulated their flight skins. Flight skins is their flight pay. X number of hours in a given month you have to accumulate before you get that extra pay. Once you've achieved those numbers of hours, you don't get any more pay. So you don't really need to go out more. So they were glad to let us take their sorties for the day. For me, this lasted until, while flying a combat mission, we were hit by a bolt. A bolt is an arrow they shoot out of a crossbow. A bolt, that's what they call it. Okay, it looks like an arrow. It's made out of bamboo. Right in the hydraulic fluid tank, and we dropped out of the sky. So I gave up flying gunner on Hueys. The pilot and co-pilot were banged up pretty bad, and the crew chief and myself were thrown free, because it's wide open on both sides of the helicopter. We just had cuts and scrapes and banged up a little bit. We grabbed the weapons, the radio, the pilot, and co-pilot, and got as far away from that wreck as we could in short order. We spent the night in a soybean field. It's kind of like a rice paddy. It's a flooded field where they grow soybeans. And we were picked up the following morning because we had our radios. They knew where we were. And we were just hiding out all night long. Needless to say, this discouraged me from volunteering to fly as a gunner in someone else's place again. Not too long after that ordeal, I guess I was pretty dumb because several of us avionics guys were asked if we would like to fly back seat in our F-4B Phantom fighters as RIOs. That's RIO stands for Radar Intercept Officer. It's back seat. Your job in the back seat of a Phantom is to look at a radar screen when the pilot finds a target and turns the aircraft over to you, and you have your own stick and you blow up what you're supposed to blow up. Sure enough, I said yes for a few months and until our squadron could get some RIOs transferred in, because that was the reason they asked us, and we were avionics, so we knew all of the equipment and the systems of the aircraft, so we were the most likely people to fill in temporarily. I wasn't disappointed. I really loved it. I was field commissioned temporarily for the time, but I gained a stripe when I went back to enlisted ranks, okay, which was just a few months later. Because of my stay in the hospital, I was extended a few months in country. We were hit pretty hard in May of 1968, every day for about 2 weeks. Duration of my tour was good and bad throughout the rest of the tour. The 68-69 TEP was almost as bad as the 67-68 TEP. And you don't hear an awful lot about the second one, but believe me, it was almost as bad. I was able to come back home in March of 1969, and I remember the huge golden nose of the Continental Airlines. Dropping off newbies, okay, people that were coming in to replace us. And they looked so much younger than we were. And getting ready to take us to Okinawa, where we staged before heading stateside. We went back to Okinawa, pick up our sea bags and everything else that we had left in Okinawa on our way there. We were told to change out of our uniforms as soon as we could when we got stateside, and to be prepared for some static from some protesters when we landed in Orange County Airport. When we landed, some nutcase shot at us. There were 4 people, medevac, in Orange County Airport, United States of America, when we got off that plane. We were called a number of things, but I don't remember any of them being complimentary. In a way, this book was a bit therapeutic, knowing that there's people like Chicky who cared enough about his friends to actually travel to a place that most everyone was trying to avoid having to go to. Well, I'm home now, retired after 40 plus years, blessed with a very tolerant wife, St. Julianne over here. 3 wonderful daughters, involved in the, as Linda had mentioned, the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Chapter 20 of the Vietnam Veterans of America. And I'm past director, but still a troop leader. I've had 2 honor flight missions this year where I was a troop leader, 71 and 73. And Honor Flight Rochester is probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life, okay? In my life. I'm basically on, what do you call it? I'm off the ground about 2 feet from Friday night until about Tuesday the following week because it's such an adrenaline rush. I call it my drug of choice whenever I can take a mission of our vets to Washington, D.C. Now, Linda asked me to mention something about Vietnam Veterans of America. She gave you the background of what Vietnam Veterans are. Okay, it was started specifically because Vietnam veterans had not been getting an awful lot of recognition. We were being shunned, and I experienced it personally, so I know it's true, by our World War II and our Korean War vets. We were not even allowed to join the American Legion or the VFW for a very long time after we came home. Now, it may sound like I'm crying in my beer, but basically it's just my brothers and sisters went through and experienced similar things as these folks, and we honor all the time. As I just mentioned to you, our Honor Flight Rochester, it is just an honor and a privilege to be able to do that for my WW2, which my father was a veteran of. We did not want that to continue, and that's why our pledge is that we will not allow any other generation of veterans to leave any new generation of veterans. Now us, I happen to be the secretary for our chapter, and there are many, many chapters throughout the country, okay, the Vietnam Veterans of America, all right? We're all kind of the dinosaurs now, okay? We're the older ones, okay? So there's not too many of our WW2s left. They're all in their hundreds if they are. Believe it or not, they're only 5 years younger, but our Korean War vets are going by pretty quick, okay? So on our missions, we rarely get our WW2 vets, however, we do get them once in a while. Our Korean War vets are minimal. We may get 6 to 10 on a specific mission, and here in Rochester we have 6 missions a year, okay? So we take 50 to 60 vets on every one of those missions, so we got a pretty good handle on what the distribution of the different eras are. So the vast majority are us old farts, the Vietnam vets, okay? We may feel like we're 39, but we don't always act it, and believe me, my bones tell me, I'm not 39 anymore. So I hope that was a pretty good reflection. I hope I didn't run you out.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Linda, do you want to say?
Wait a minute.
Dina has it.
I got the mic.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, we can do some Q&A too. Yeah, we will.
I'd be glad, yeah, I'd be
Larry
glad.
a chance to get his breath and reacclimate to the world and tell you about one of the slides here. When it comes back, you will see a picture of General Westmoreland greeting a nurse. And there's a little story that Bill told me about that. General Westmoreland grew up and drove up in his black sedan, labeled with all the insignia that one should have, and he's always guarded by South Koreans. Maybe they trust the South Koreans more than the American soldiers. I have no idea. That wasn't explained to me. So anyway, he had to check into the hospital. He had a minor injury. So he went to check in, and the first soldier went and checked him in, and all's fine. And then he yelled up to the second soldier, who had a little higher rank. He said, "The general is ready." Pause, silence. What came back was, "Tell the general to take a seat. There's no rink in this field hospital." When I read the book, I thought I knew about Vietnam, How much do we know about anything? The best way to learn about history is to have a Larry Strassner tell us what it was really like, not a Hollywood scriptwriter or somebody who interpreted somebody else's experiences. I was shocked during the Tet Offensive that there were only 2 to 4 Marines guarding this huge compound. I thought probably everybody sitting in this room would know better than that. I absolutely found seems to be, like in my job, a separation from those up here who don't go in the classroom, a separation to those who serve in administrative positions in the military, whatever branch they're in, and those with boots on the ground who are carrying out the orders and doing the fighting. And there's General Westmoreland signing in with his nurse. A few years ago, Dorothy and I, in a moment of madness, decided to go to Vietnam. I always wanted to go, and I was teaching in a charter school with a lot of Vietnam vets, and they spent a lot of time with me at lunch, telling me all about their experiences. I said to Dorothy, let's go to Vietnam. She looked at me as if I lost my mind, but it's not the first time she looked at me as if I lost my mind. We made plans for the trip. My friends went to Italy. Linda Rose went to Vietnam. We compared stories. My husband dropped Dorothy and I off at the Monroe County Airport, and 34 hours later, totally exhausted and out of our minds, we keyed into our room in South Vietnam with a stopover in Japan. Tokyo, I believe. Never saw Japan, but I could say I've been there. My boots were on the ground. It was a very unusual trip because, unbeknownst to us, we were with a small van. There were, what, 8 people, if that. A driver, a Vietnamese driver, highly educated, absolutely brilliant. Command of English was probably better than ours. And there was a woman with us who brought her son, who was a grown-up by now. And she had been married to the highest-ranking NGO in Vietnam. Her stories were priceless. So the guide, our driver tour guide, took us not only to what he had to show us, but incorporated what she had to tell us about. It was a trip of a lifetime. We crawled through the Cu Chi tunnels. Good thing I was thinner than I am now. The only ones who crawled through the Cu Chi tunnels were the Mexican army guys, because they were very slightly built. And all sorts of things happened in those tunnels. They could smell who was who. The guy you were fighting with during the day could turn out to be your mortal enemy at night. You didn't know. We went to the prison, and what we read at the prison not only made us sick and lose an appetite, but brought back the war, almost as if we were there. We went to where the journalists hang out. We started in the South. In the South, the Vietnamese didn't let you go. They followed that van until they could make a sale. In the North, they didn't want to have anything to do with you. A big difference in a group of people. The country itself is very beautiful. The devastation done by Agent Orange is indescribable. What it did to the living things on the earth there, people, plants, animals, everything. It was a lesson in living history. It was a remarkable, once-in-a-lifetime experience. Thinking we had enough there, we headed to Cambodia and went through the killing fields, complete with skulls. The bright note there was we managed to climb up Angkor Wat. I tell you, I couldn't do it today. The woman next to me was doing it in sandals. I wanted to just shove her off. It was really annoying to me. I had sneakers on. It was a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and when I came back and went back to work, the guys from me who had served in Vietnam, they had lunch with me every day for a week. to debrief me about my experiences. It was an awesome, amazing 3-week experience. So we're looking at Vietnam, which is now a pretty prosperous country that we do trade with, and know that our former enemies frequently turn around, as Germany did, as Italy did, as maybe Iran will someday, who knows, turn out to be, for political reasons, economic purposes, climate change, and everything else, turn out to be people that we have to learn to work with, learn to understand. But nobody who has not been in the uniform of the United States and served actively can have the feelings, the memories, and the stories as one who have served. So all of us have a job to do. When the United States government brings up Veterans Affairs, there is no veteran who should be in want of housing, of food, of education, of job opportunities, of family help, or anything else that they need, ever, because we are here and they were there. So we have an obligation to shout out, write your representatives, or do what I do, because nobody can read my writing. Pick up the phone and call, and I do. Because if we don't speak up for them when we do not have a draft, who is going to go over the next time and speak for us? I leave you with that conundrum of what we could do together to make life better. So, now we're open for questions. Who do we have?
I can go from, it's working? Okay. I'm also a Vietnam vet. I was not as fortunate as Lee. I was down in the Delta. I was on the Swift boats, the PBRs. One thing Lee didn't mention, and I think we do, the veterans from World War I, World War II, and Korea knew who the enemy was. We did not. As Linda said, you could be drinking with him in the morning, that afternoon he's trying to kill you. And the other thing too, I've put Vietnam out of my mind. It was an experience. I was there long before Lee. I was already out of there in the beginning of '65. But Linda said it's a beautiful country, and we defoliated it. I just want to hit one other thing too. Lee mentioned something else that's very close to him, is the honor flight. I did that, and it was an experience of a lifetime. When I came home from Vietnam, Lee came home on an airplane from Vietnam. I came home in a transport. He had the unfortunate experience of being not welcome. I wasn't welcome very much either, but I'll tell you what, my welcome home was honor flight. I'm gonna ask you, if anybody's got a few extra pennies, they want to give to a worthy organization, honor flight is the one. We take care of our veterans. And as, once again, Lee being a Marine, I was Navy, but I was attached to the Marine Corps. Semper Fi, buddy.
Semper Fi.
Nobody left behind.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? I thought I saw some hands before. Can I ask, so
Absolutely.
So the generation prior to me, my father-in-law is a Vietnam vet, as I said, who also worked for GM and Delphi and helped set up in Mexico. So I swear you must have crossed paths at some time. But the first war I remember was watching the Gulf War on TV in the 90s. And are there any Gulf War veterans that go by honor flight, or is it?
It's Desert Storm.
Desert Storm. Desert Storm. Do they?
We will.
Okay.
Just briefly, okay, honor flight, it started in 2005, okay? In 2004, the World War II Memorial was dedicated and opened up to the public, okay? And I might mention that those memorials, there's only one monument in Washington, D.C. One. That's the Washington Monument. Everything else is a memorial, not a monument, okay? All right. Honor Flight started by, oh shoot, I just said his name. Anyway, we had the originator, okay, was a retired Air Force pilot. He was working as a physician's assistant in Ohio. So he asked some of his patients if they had ever been to their new World War II memorial. Most of them said no, and it wasn't on high on their bucket list, okay? Now this is 2005, right? So he asked them, how about if I take you? So this gentleman, I'll take him in a second. He went out and got 5 of his buddies, and they rented out of their own pocket civilian airplanes, and they took a dozen WW2 vets to Washington, D.C. so that they could see their memorial and they could personally thank all the brothers and sisters that they left behind, okay, the ones that passed away. It's a phenomenal memorial, all right? That started an explosion across the country. Today, all right, today there are over 130 hubs across the United States. Rochester's hub started in 2008. To date, okay, we have taken over 4,000 veterans since 2008. Rochester is the only hub east of the Mississippi that goes down and spends the night. All the rest of the hubs, and believe me, there's 11 hubs in New York State alone. All the rest of the hubs up and down the East Coast, they go to DC and come home the same day. So it's pretty rough. We have a phenomenal welcome home at the airport. We take 50 to 60 vets, plus 50 to 60 guardians, plus about 18 or 19 staff members. We have 3 buses once we get to DC. Okay, we started out with just 1 bus, okay? But now we're to the point where we have 3, okay? That's how many people that we take. We leave early in the morning, we fly into Baltimore. You can attest to this. We have a motorcycle escort from the airport.
Can I just say one thing? That motorcycle escort is unbelievable. Going from Baltimore to Washington. These guys stop traffic on Interstate 95 so these 3 buses can go. It's just unbelievable.
We head into DC. We have specific memorials that we want to visit. We try to visit as many as we can within the day. Traffic kind of modifies things once in a while, but we make sure that we hit as much as we possibly can. I have had veterans that have been on that mission say to me, there's 3 milestones in my life. One is when I got married. The second is when I had my kids. And the third is when I went on honor flight. So that makes you feel good. We have had veterans that have been on honor flight missions that have asked to be buried in their honor flight shirt. We give every veteran a shirt, a nice cotton sleeve collared shirt, and they're just so proud of it, okay? So I guess enough of the sales on the honor flight, but you are absolutely right. The only money that supports this in our budget is between $475,000 to $550,000 a year. I can honestly tell you that. 97% of that money goes into our missions. 97%. There is no one on payroll. Everyone is volunteer. We have over 600. Now, Dina asked about the most recent conflicts and wars. Right now, we have approximately 1,000 Vietnam veterans in the queue. All right, so once we get through them, okay, at 300 a year, then we'll start with the next generation. Okay, we don't plan on quitting anytime too soon unless all the money runs out. Okay, so I apologize.
No, that was a great explanation, thank you. We have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I've got a couple of things.
Yes.
First, when did the Vietnam Memorial go up? It was fairly recently, wasn't it? No.
Well, it depends on what you consider recent. It was back in the 80s, okay? It was back in the 80s. I think Vietnam was before Korea and before World War II, both. And I believe it was 82, if that sticks out in my head. 83, okay, is when the memorial was dedicated. Vietnam Memorial.
Thank you. And the next thing I want to say is thank you for coming here and sharing with us, and thank you very much for your time defending your country despite what you
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There's an album going around that Larry brought, so wherever it is, if you want to look at it, it will be up here. There's the poster, everything. Thank you so much. Hope you come back in December 1st. How the Word is Passed, Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America. The book is by Clint Smith, and Dr. Sean Nelms, Superintendent of East High School, will be our presenter. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. very, very much.
And
Thank you.
I can talk to these people, some of the folks here.
Yeah, by yourself.
So I have
Told me 6 weeks. New York State Justice.
I know, right?
Our experiences this summer. We did a wireless search that was, now, so from Chinese to I started seeing it's a big place for the mummy. So now that he's studying history.
All right.
We have to go back and see the mummies and all our other pictures that are from.
Exactly.
Yeah, your kids will in and out of the house. Goodbye.
Very good.
Great. It was. I would hope for no one could take it.
gotta go. Someday.